Camilla, are there so many people out of work the country may go bankrupt? A new report suggests that could be true.
Why do we keep on getting so much doom-mongering? We've got Keir Starmer banging on about things can only get worse. We've got Lord Darcy's report last week saying the NHS is broken. And now this. We're heading towards bankruptcy because we're all too unhealthy. Kamal, we've got to find some solutions to these problems.
They will be here in the Daily Tea podcast.
Good.
Stick with us. And we're also going to talk about bungee jumping, Sir Ed Davey.
Everyone's favourite politician stroke action man. He's giving a speech at conference, but Kamal, I'm concerned because I think there's a lefty conspiracy going on here. Keeps on banging on about what the Conservatives have done wrong, rather than suggesting what Labour should do right.
Bloody lefty conspiracy, another one.
Another one. We will be picking it apart.
Welcome to the Daily Tea with me, Kamal Ahmed.
And me, Camilla Tominey. Is picking it apart even an expression?
I think it's a rough one, yeah, it's good
Is
enough.
it picking it apart? I
Yes.
said yesterday about Keir Starmer, stickler to the rules. I meant stickler for the rules.
I noticed that,
I
but
know,
there we are.
but on the vein of Starmer,
Yes.
this report is depressing. Why haven't we made more progress? This is a report by the
Institute for Public Policy Research. It's a left-wing organisation,
Ugh.
Camilla, which you don't know the name of because, of course,
It is in the brief. I can see it now.
Okay.
I like to call it the IPPR. I've never called it that. I'm completely
Start
unfamiliar
this
with
bit
it.
again.
Right.
I think go part
Right.
of it again, yeah.
Another day, Kamal, another report from a left-wing organisation saying we're all doomed. We're doomed. It's like the guy in Dad's Army. We're all doomed. And this time,
What was his name? What was his name?
I don't know.
Fraser.
Fraser.
We've been told by the gallery. Thank you, gallery.
Captain Fraser. To be fair, I'm trying to put a positive spin on yet more negative news. And this is serious. Let's not debase the subject matter of this report, because it's suggesting that, as you said, Kamal, Britain is on a path to disease and bankruptcy, with the number of people out of work due to ill health set to rise to 4.3 million by the end of this parliament. To put that into context, currently there are 2.8 million people out of work due to ill health, so that would be a more than 50% rise.
The increase has been driven by a mental health crisis and COVID, which apparently, according to the report, has created 900,000 missing workers. Although this report has been done by the Institute for Public Policy Research, as you say, a think tank on the left hand side of politics, it's actually, to an extent, cross-party. Lord Bethell, former Conservative health minister, is a member of the commission, as is Sally Davies, who was the former chief medical officer for England. Although it is coming from a point of view, and we'll get into some of the solutions it suggests, and then, Camilla, what you and I think about that, and then some evidence from the past about what might actually work. This is raising, I remember David Davis raised it in one of our conversations we had on the podcast, this huge, probably COVID-related issue that the pandemic and the close downs that happened during the pandemic, we've never recovered from it.
No.
We've not recovered from it in terms of productivity, particularly in the public sector. In the public sector, and we've not recovered it in terms of back to work.
I get the point you're making about COVID, but what I can't quite understand is why the left's solution to all this is so interventionalist, when actually this just might take some time. Something completely unprecedented happened to the world. We shut down. It wasn't like a world war. It was something completely different. We locked down our economy. We closed our schools. Something like that had never happened before. And it's going to take time to recover from that. But again, all the time, figures on the left, nanny statists, suggest that we must do something, we must intervene and do something. So this report comes out with a number of ideas. Higher taxes on tobacco, alcohol, unhealthy food, vapes and gambling. That could raise more than 10 billion a year by the end of Parliament, it suggests. We could fix the crisis in our benefit system, so scrap the 2-child benefit limit and introduce a right to try for anyone on out-of-work benefits, meaning they could try going back to work without initially losing their benefits. Neighbourhood health centres to address regional health inequality, investment in local health infrastructure like green spaces, free school meals for primary school children, etc., etc. Now, I like the recommendations when it comes to localism. I like this idea of people having a local infrastructure, more green spaces, more advice on a local level, when it comes to health and well-being. We discussed it, as you said last week, the Tim, closing down community hospitals and not giving people somewhere on their doorstep to go with their problems was in itself problematic. But this idea of making unhealthy food more expensive troubles me. We had the sugar tax. We had the levy on sugary drinks. It came in after it was announced by George Osborne in 2016. I was looking up what difference has this levy made. The Guardian reported that it may have reduced 5,000 cases of obesity. Well, okay, I suppose that's a drop in the ocean. Our children are getting bigger. Apparently, according to this report, our primary school children aren't as tall as their European counterparts, which suggests the degree to which they may be stifled in their growth because they're not having a healthy enough diet. We've got lefties talking about the idea of more green space, and yet we've got a Labour government that's advocating a sort of concreting over the green belt. I was thinking, what is, pardon the pun, the level playing field for children of all creeds, colours and classes? It literally is a field. It is a field in England where you could bring a jumper, you could use it for a goalpost and you could play football. But we've lost those green spaces. Righties were criticised for banging on about playing fields and the selling off of playing fields under Labour. And yet we now learn that we have got 76,000 children in schools affected by the selling off of their green land. We've got fewer swimming pools. We've got fewer council-owned football pitches. So there's so much more to this than just, make sugar more expensive. We've talked about smartphones. There must be a correlation, surely, between unhealthy children and what they're eating, admittedly. And I think in COVID we saw this explosion of the sort of Deliveroo generation. But it must also be linked to smartphone use.
I'm not going to get into left-right and whether this is a lefty issue or a righty issue. What happened during COVID was also the NHS shut down. If it wasn't COVID related, it stopped doing procedures and helping people through other health issues. And the NHS is 11% less productive since COVID.
Yeah, so even though it's had more money ploughed in, and it's got more people, more staff.
Yeah, and more people. So there is a big issue with the health service, which is really a sickness service. So the problem that we have is that we have the NHS actually is dealing with people who are already ill. What I do find a little frustrating about the long list of things we could do here, I do like that right to try idea. This idea that there should be a tapered way of trying to move back into a work environment which for mental health, for your own autonomy, for the idea of personal responsibility is one of the best ways to solve many of these issues. If you are in a reasonably paid, fulfilling job, that is the best way to retain your physical health and your mental health. So the right to try without this cliff edge where you are paying oddly at the margin because you lose benefit for every pound you earn.
Yes.
You're paying this, what is ultimately a very high marginal tax rate for every extra hour you work because of your loss of benefit. That does seem quite interesting. But you don't need to what might be described as kitchen sink it. Add all these taxes to all these things people do, ban lots and lots of different things when there are simple solutions that are off the shelf and have been done and shown to be successful in the past. Now, Camilla, I'm going to refer to my political hero, Tony Blair, and I know it will get a sigh from you, but the Sure Start system that was introduced in 1998 was a local hub. So I agree with you on the localism point. It was a local hub that parents and local communities could use that would have education support, parenting support, health support. And a study done by the Institute of Fiscal Studies after that scheme had been abandoned by the Conservatives found that education and health outcomes for younger people who were near short start centres and parents who used short start centres improved markedly. It's a very simple idea that local people, once they are given the information, once they have the social capital to make the decisions they can make, it doesn't need the state to tell them what to do. I tried. I think both of us, didn't we? We sat down this morning, we discussed this, we realised we were both from a very similar position. We are both taxes rising, more and more money being put in, as you say about the NHS, more money and more people has gone in, productivity has fallen. We don't instinctively agree with it. And I pushed myself to think, well, we have to do something. But actually, there is a something. It's very simple, something similar to Sure Start.
I think, to be fair, the Tories would defend themselves on that by saying that they introduced a new family hub system, okay, to try and coordinate that kind of early years care. But we're talking about Britain being the sick man of Europe when lots of patients can't get in to see their GPs. There's a disconnect here. Oh, let's start taxing tobacco, sugar and alcohol, but not address the central problem here, which is people do not have enough direct access to healthcare. We've got children who aren't able to see an NHS dentist. Okay, if we're talking about prevention, then we cannot continue with this farrago, which is people on the phone for days on end, trying to get a GP's appointment, not being able to get in to see the doctor face to face, and being castigated to online, where, I'm sorry, patients aren't seen adequately in very many cases. Okay, this report comes out as we learn that GPs apparently are now working on average 26 hours a week. I don't know if I've mentioned it, Kamal. My father is medically trained in the same way that Keir Starmer's father was a toolmaker. I don't like to talk about it, but let me just say this. When he was a GP back in the 80s and 90s, the idea of him working a 26-hour week would have been laughable. We've got 2/3 of GPs now working part-time, not full-time. That creates a gap. That creates a problem for the number of patients that need to be treated and helped. We've also got, junior doctors now happy because they've been given a 22% pay rise, but again, threatening strike action maybe next year because the British Medical Association, their sort of union, has become increasingly militant. So that's the backdrop here as well, that these left-wing reports never seem to quite address. We're all pretending that we've got a good healthcare system when we don't. And I come back to the central point. Instead of making unhealthy foods more expensive, and this may be a problem to do with British farming and importing and exporting, why aren't healthier foods and healthier choices made more attractive at the supermarket? I'll take the example of a banana. Anybody listening or watching this knows that we have those moments where we want to choose something healthy and we look at a single banana and it's like 75p. And then you just think to yourself, well, I may as well just get a Mars bar. I mean, my husband calls bananas nature's Mars bar, and I agree with him on that. But you've got nuts I get the whole thing they've done in the supermarket. They've swapped sweets for nuts. A packet of nuts these days is about £4. If you're on a low income, and this is the realistic point here, right? You are working a shift, okay? You're coming back late at night. You've got kids who have just come home from school. Maybe they've gone via the chippy and got a punnet of chips because they're hungry and it's only £1. You haven't got much time. Your husband, meanwhile, is going out on his shift at night. Maybe he's a long-distance lorry driver just about to head up the M1. Okay, you're going to cook something as convenient as possible, and that might be just sticking a pizza in the oven. You're not going to have time to do a kind of 1940s or 50s style meat and 2 veg dinner. Unfortunately, we've got most families now have both parents working, so the old traditional housewife at home cooking up a storm all afternoon has gone. And yet the options aren't there for people on low incomes. The option for people on low incomes is a microwavable lasagna, which is an ultra-processed food, basically full of crap.
Interesting article written by Su Ping Chan alongside our coverage of this report. Sue is our economics editor. One thing that really jumped out of her piece was that nearly 4 million people are paid jobless benefits without having to look for work. So there is no linkage of this idea of welfare to work.
Sorry, 4 million people are on benefits that don't have
Are
to be-
paid jobless benefits without having to look for work.
But is that because they have been signed off? Because that was the other point I was going to make about GPs. The GP approach now, because those who are working full-time are overworked and people are working part-time because they feel too much pressure and they're going to get burnout, is to go through patient after patient after patient. And if somebody comes in and wants to be signed off sick, there's no further investigation. There's just a sick note. And I'm not blaming the patient or the doctor for that. I'm just saying that is now a fact of life. Back in the day, maybe my dad would have put a difficult case at the end of his surgery day and tried to drill into the detail of, well, hang on, what is it that's stopping you from working? These days, surgeries are like sausage factories. And therefore, that's also fueling a sick note culture, right?
Yes, and people phone in and say, I'm feeling this, and this, and they are given a diagnosis over the phone. So there's far less face-to-face actual discussion and conversation about how they are and how they're feeling. But
that 4 million, though, are they like completely signed off sick, as in they cannot physically work?
Well, as I say, this is from Sue's article, and it was an issue that jumped out at me because of this problem around long-term sick leave without any mechanism for getting back into work. Now, of course, I think it's excellent that you've said we're not blaming anybody, because I think we did go through, I think particularly maybe back in the 80s, it was sort of this blame of worklessness. It was fecklessness and laziness that led to this. We're not talking about the same thing now, but we are still talking about an epidemic problem for this country about the levels of ill health or mediocre health. And anyone who's been into a hospital recently will know that going into a hospital takes up hours and hours and days. So it's very, very hard to work and to be on any medication, because you're asked to queue here and queue there and do this thing and do that thing. It is frankly easier for people to just sign off, go on to benefits. But then if there is no route back to work, once you've been out of work for a number of years, it's of course very hard to go back to work.
Yeah.
Work becomes this very difficult thing that is a completely different environment, and your home environment and the work environment become very distant.
Just you mentioning the 80s there, I don't think we want to go back to the days of demonising people on benefits, but I do think that something has changed. And I think back in the old days, if people were out of work, they would be desperately scrambling to get back into work. And I get the sense since COVID that some people seem to be making worklessness a lifestyle choice.
One thing that has also changed since the 80s is that unemployment isn't that big threat.
Yes.
Mass unemployment is no longer a thing. Since the financial crisis, lots of people thought mass unemployment, like we had in the 70s and 80s, would be back. And it isn't. We actually have a huge number of vacancies. One of the biggest problems for UK productivity is the number of vacancies, and we have people often with the wrong skills to fill all those vacancies. So that is another issue that is connected to this ill health problem that we have.
Can we solve this problem, Kamal?
Well, I think the simple thing is, whether you call them family hubs or Sure Start, is very simple interventions which are not about taxing, which are not about banning things, but are about enabling people, are about building what's called, I don't actually like the phrase very much, but their social capital, so that they can make people, whether that's you and me or whatever background you come from, can make better choices about what it is they do for their families, that they start enjoying their downtime with, health-related activities.
Yes.
It just becomes part of their everyday life.
But what about incentives for being healthy rather than penalties for not?
Yeah, Sue, there's one bit again in Sue's article, which is from the IPPR report, which I think on that point, Camilla, does something that we could maybe be more supportive of. It talks about the government to set up a fair work charter that gives businesses who support staff health needs more tax breaks.
Yes.
So don't increase tax, give an incentive for your bottom line as a business owner to support your staff in various ways.
Because I'm thinking, in Boris Johnson's day, because he was worried about his own health, and do you remember he said that he felt that he was more badly affected by COVID because he was overweight, and he got, if you remember, Sir Keith Mills in to try and roll out a programme of incentivising people to make healthier choices, a little bit like mirroring what some private health companies do. If you record that you've exercised and that you've eaten healthier, then it's not that your premium goes down, but you sort of get credits back, and I think it makes it easier for you to book healthcare, because they're basically saying, look, you're a better customer for us to have because you're not really ever needing the doctor. Keith Mills, who was the man who orchestrated the Air Miles scheme back in the day, wanted to set up this scheme whereby people would be rewarded for good behaviour. And I just wonder whether there is something in that. Obviously, it got dead and buried with Johnson's government, but could it be revived?
Yeah,
I'm just all for sort of solutions. So much of the rhetoric since Labour have come in, it's all been about opining the problems. Come up with some solutions.
And also, that's a much more positive way. It almost leans into that nudge theory, like Air Miles, encouraging different types of behaviour by just giving people information. One thing that the report also does ask for or say could be there is almost like a health audit, like we have an economic audit, like GDP, but for health.
Yes.
And that every year we would have 5 or 10 key indicators about the health of our nation, compare that with our main competitors around the world, and ensure that those figures are always going in the right direction. So just like we should give people much more information about where their tax is spent, we should give people much more information about how healthy not only the nation is, but maybe their local community. People are incentivized by thinking, oh, if this helps my local community on the local fun run to be incentivized to get some kind of community support, I'll go and do that.
Yeah.
And it's all about creating that spirit of shared endeavour rather than the clunking way that a kind of left. I don't think it's. I know, Camilla, you put the lefties in all one big pot of people.
Well, that's
but
because the
there's
righties are put in all one big pot. I mean, I'm
a kind of-
associated with Pol Pot, so it is a bit tricky.
But I think there is part of the left which does believe in what might be described as the clunking fist approach to problems, and there is part of the left which is much more about incentivization, which is much closer to Camilla.
Yes.
Frankly, stare you in the eye where you are.
Talking of clunking lefty fists, shall we discuss Ed Davey at the Lib Dem conference? Don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. That'll be coming up next.
It's the final day of the Liberal Democrat conference.
What
I know,
a shame.
Camilla,
Oh, I've been loving it.
you've been glued to the live stream
Indeed.
all day, every day. Lib Dem on YouTube, I'm assuming. I don't know, to be honest. But Daredevil Ed Davey has finished the day with a big speech about what he wants to do as leader of the opposition. Let's not forget, the Liberal Democrats had an incredibly successful election, 72 MPs. I think their best result in 100 years.
Blimey.
There were polls before the election that suggested the Lib Dems could become the official opposition. Now, that obviously hasn't quite happened, but they're only 40-odd seats behind the Conservatives. And that actually makes them much more important as part of the political ecology of the UK, because His Majesty's official opposition is a very important part of the parliamentary system of the UK. So what the Lib Dems do really matters in holding Labour to account, as well as what the Conservatives do. So whether or not you support or don't support the Liberal Democrats or voted for them at the last election, it does matter how they now use those 72 new MPs to hold the Labour government to account.
But I'm not quite so convinced that Ed Davey, in all his left-wing glory, is the man to hold Sir Keir Starmer's feet to the flames. Let's just listen to how many times he echoed the Prime Minister in referring to Tory failure.
The Conservative government broke it so badly over so many years, the Conservatives' shocking mismanagement. Conservatives don't care. Clear up the Conservatives' mess. Today's Conservative Party simply cannot fulfill. Conservatives are already showing they are unfit for opposition too. These four Conservatives didn't care about real people's everyday problems. Consign the Conservative Party to the history books. Places with Conservative councils that have let people down for far too long. Vanquish what's left of the Conservative Party. After years of failure and neglect under the Conservative Party, Tory geniuses who cheered Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng to the rafters, is it? Legacy of failure from the last Conservative government. Conservative Party left office with almost 6.5 million people languishing on hospital waiting lists.
Kamal, I went through the speech, so you didn't have to, and there are 23 references to how badly the Conservatives did, and just 7 references to Labour. Now, I would suggest that if you are trying to be the official opposition, that you should really be criticising the current government more and being more forward-looking than looking back at what the Tories did wrong. Not least because, by the way, the Lib Dems don't have a great record to stand on when it comes to criticising the Conservatives because they were in coalition government with them.
Still scarred by it, I think. The Liberal Democrats have always been a do more opposition, not be a different opposition. So they haven't got a different prospectus on what needs to happen: fix the NHS, more public investment, more money, higher taxes, environment needs to be tackled, etc., etc. But they want Labour to do more of it. So they're not attacking them from a different position. The problem for the Liberal Democrats is they are stuck in a soft left centre, which is do more of everything and it all needs more money. He talks about in his speech investment up front. You invest up front and you get the returns later. That is constantly the argument of the Liberal Democrats. Jam tomorrow, but pay for it today. This era of the Liberal Democrats came out of the split in the left in the 1980s when the left in Labour went hard left under Michael Foot and the SDP was created to be the soft left voice. As soon as Labour moved back under Tony Blair into that soft left position, the Liberal Democrats have been flailing to find themselves a real position of opposition. So he did talk about freer, fairer, more open.
Yeah.
But they're not about being freer. They're not lowercase l liberal.
No.
They're not about people should be allowed to get on with what it is they want to do as long as it doesn't affect other people. That's the true liberal position and was much more in their tradition before the 1980s created this new situation for the Liberal Democrats. Given the scarring they got under the coalition government, they've gone back into this comfort zone and they're now constantly going to be saying to Labour, yes, you should do these things, you should just spend more money on it.
Yes, and you're right to say that. Like, the Liberals of this country, I think, are the Conservatives. Some of them haven't done a great job on it. People like Rishi Sunak advocating generational smoking bans and all the rest of it. And that's probably why in Australia the Conservatives are called the Liberals and Labour are called Labour. The trouble for the Liberal Democrats is this all happened actually during the referendum and beyond, because that attempt by them to reverse the referendum result and to campaign against the Leave vote and campaign against that Leave vote basically wasn't liberal or democratic. So they sort of squandered those characteristics. And I think also, I mean, at the end of the day, Ed Davey is much more closely aligned ideologically, spiritually, or whatever with Keir Starmer and that kind of thinking than he ever will be with the Conservatives. I note in the speech he has a little go at the Scottish National Party, and that's fine. But there's this idea as well that the Liberal Democrats' popularity is overstated. Because of our first past the post system, they've ended up with 72 seats on the back of a smaller vote share than Reform achieved. So
they become a winning, electorally winning machine. They're not so keen, well, they are maybe, they say they are as keen now on PR and reform as they ever have been, but it certainly wasn't the big deal that it would have been 10 or 20 years ago.
So the trouble is with the Liberal Democrats as well is that they've got these 72 seats almost by default because of the first past the post system. So actually more people voted for reform than the Liberal Democrats, and yet Reform only end up with 5 seats. We're talking about the Lib Dems being on 12.2% of the vote and Reform being on 14.3%.
Yes, they're certainly talking less now about proportional representation
funny
and
that.
reform of parliamentary voting systems.
For people on the right, by the way, I do as well think that, it was that situation. Quite a lot of people voted for the Lib Dems because they just couldn't bear the idea of rewarding the Tories for failure, and they couldn't go as far left as Labour. So they think to themselves, maybe the Lib Dems run their local council. Look, they can get the bins out and fill potholes. How bad can it be? I'm sorry. I mean, I'm not trying to take away from Davey, but this is a Pyrrhic victory.
The Liberal Democrats will have a role at that community level, I bet, in fighting almost every planning application,
Yes.
every infrastructure, transport plan. They will be out there campaigning as good local community campaigners, and there's nothing wrong with that. But in this speech, they have reverted to type. They've demanded more GPs, more NHS dentists, more community pharmacies. As I say, they are the do more opposition, not do different. They would have, I think it would be better for the parliamentary system if they did rediscover their liberal roots, suspicious of government action, pro-entrepreneurialism, maybe take that space that has maybe been a little vacated by the Conservatives. As you say, they become a weird mixture of interventionism and very tough sort of reformist approach to politics. There may be a space there, but at the moment, the Liberal Democrats, Ed Davey said that the role of the Liberal Democrats had never been clearer.
No, I'm not clear about it
I
at
think
all.
that the opposite is true for the Liberal Democrats. Under a Labour government, their role has become far less distinct.
But also they keep on flip-flopping themselves. So if you take the first by-election that they won, which was in Chesham and Amersham near me, from the Tories, they had campaigned vociferously in favour of HS2. And yet as soon as they start campaigning in the Chilterns, they're suddenly against it.
Yeah.
And so people are saying, well, you're facing both directions at once.
So many local MPs are like that, aren't they, though, to be honest?
Very much so. And it's the same with these Labour. We need to build more homes.
And
but
the Conservatives,
not in my
Theresa May had her
constituency.
moments with
I know.
let's go.
But let's be honest, when we've analysed Ed Davey, we have celebrated him and congratulated him for being the voice of our polluted rivers, lakes and seas, which I think is a really good place for him to position himself. We've also seen him as the voice for social care. He's totally credible on this because he looked after his mother and he looks after his young teenage son, John, who has got severe disabilities. It's completely genuine and authentic. He's been there, he's lived it, he can speak and advocate on behalf of carers. That should be his focus. I think you talk about the confusion of the Conservatives. There are lots of people in the blue wall for whom a leader like Robert Jenrick or Kemi Badenoch, who are the current sort of favourites, might be too right-wing. There are people who want a more compassionate form of, as we are now describing it, liberalism, to whom he could really appeal. But unfortunately as well, the other thing about the Lib Dems is they've got caught up in culture wars. You know, they can't define what a woman is. They're sort of very much the party of supporting the kind of policies that really annoy the right on diversity and inclusion and all that. So that again they've become a bit muddied. They're sort of muddied by their association with the Conservatives during the coalition. They're now muddied by having been in bed with Labour in opposition for all those years. I don't really think they know where they are. So contrary to what he claims.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, as you say, issue by issue, social care and water pollution, yes, those are two issues, but that's not a political philosophy.
No.
You're absolutely...
Where are they economically? I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. He did make... Let's give Ed Davey, he does talk a lot about caring for his mother, the delight, but also the tough, hard yards with John, his wonderful son that he speaks so movingly about, who's 16 now. Those are very powerful moments in the speech.
To be fair to him, he was lampooned during the election campaign for doing all of those stunts, but he did attract attention, and that's what you have to do in opposition.
He said he wanted to do more stunts, and it was only health and safety that stopped him. Sensitive listeners, please cover your ears. Putting a hand up a cow's bottom, and less sensitive, wing walking on a biplane, which you could have seen Sir Ed Davey do as well.
I can't think of anything I'd like to see more than Ed Davey suspended in the sky
With his hand up a cow's bottom, maybe. Who knows?
I tell you what, if Ed Davey can achieve both of those aims at once, I may well vote Liberal Democrat next time round, Kamal.
We'll hold you to that, Camilla. You don't need to write us. You don't need to write to us about cows or anything related to cows and their behinds, but do write to us about this episode of The Daily Tea around worklessness. What are the solutions? Have you been trapped in a situation where it's been hard to get back into work? Maybe there are some good stories out there that we can hear which give us some solutions. We are at thedailytea@telegraph.co.uk. The email is also in the show notes. You can contact us also on socials at Daily Tea Podcast on TikTok, X and Instagram.
We'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m.